Hi, hello, good morning, everybody. We are just in time. This is 10 a.m., so let's give 2 or 3 minutes to start with our conversation about the electronic value declaration. Just allowing all to get connected. Thanks everybody for joining to this seminar. I think that we will have a lot of persons here. So if you have any question, please do not hesitate to send me also an email or to leave your question in the chat. And if we don't have time to answer all the questions, of course, I insist you can send me an email or we can talk about any doubt you have. Um, I don't know if you were in my last webinar. I just some months ago in March, I talked about this important issue of the electronic value declaration. It was a webinar in Spanish, and it was more focused on the obligation for Mexican importers. Since this webinar will be in English, I will try to focus all the obligations on how exporters in the USA or other country must be the obligation to comply with this electronic value declaration. No, yeah, just trying to understand why your clients or your related companies are pushing so hard to comply with these obligations. So I think that we have an important number of persons now. So let's start. Good morning, everyone. I extend my warmest welcome to this webinar again, which, as you can see in your screen, it's about electronic value declaration. We will focus on risk mitigation and operational clarity with a focus on exporters. My name is Jasmine Martinez, and I am associate at Cascio Cavazos at Newton. And today I have the privilege of joining you to address a topic that, without doubt, represents and have been representing one of the most significant changes in customs compliance that we have seen in the recent years in Mexico. Also, you probably already know, we have had a lot of changes in customs matters. I will try also to explain some of these changes because at the end of the day, they are impacting also in the obligation of the submission of this electronic value declaration. So let me begin with a direct question. How many of you have felt uncertainty about how to properly comply with the electronic value declaration? If we have some Mexicans here in this conversation, but also American or foreign persons that are joining to this seminar, probably you are here because you felt uncertainty about which document, what do I need to send to my client or to my related party to comply with this obligation. So if the answer is yes, you are uncertainty, you are in the right place because the goal of this session is not simply to inform about the regulation, the rule, or to explain you about these obligations. I will try to explain you with practical tools and with the criteria that we have developed here in Cascio Cavazos and Newton about how we can comply with this obligation. Okay, so as you can see in your screen, we will try to, because probably we will have a matter of time, but if we can, we will address these 8 topics that you have in your screen. First, we will talk about the context and the rationale behind this obligation. I also will address some specific background related to the customs modifications, the modifications in the customs law. Second, the importer-specific obligations. Third, the requirements, the specific requirements for the value declaration. Fourth, the recommended verifications. We prepared a specific chart and checklist for you to allow you to comply with all the documentation that you need to submit in order to comply with this obligation. This is the MVE checklist. We will talk about exception and special cases and comments on case study. I know that probably you will not submit the declaration into the electronic platform. However, it is important for you to know at least what is required in this platform. So we will do a fast revision of this platform. Actually, the platform has been modified. It's almost the same, but well, the objective of this specific point is to let you know what we need to submit and how the importer is seeing this obligation. Okay. Finally, the challenges for importers and exporter. Okay. As we go through each section, I invite US exporters to view the MVE not only as a Mexican importer obligation, but as a shared documentation process. It is really, really important for you to understand that at the end of the day, what the MVE has done is that we need to have a close communication with all related parties, with our clients, in order for them let them comply with the obligations, okay? The cooperation of the US importers or foreign exporters, sorry, will directly impact whether the Mexican customer or the Mexican related party, for example, the maquilas, can import without delays, observations, or any additional scrutiny from the customs authority. Because this is also a matter of revision for the customs authority and the SAT authority. That being said, let's start with the specific content of this presentation. So, in your screen, you will see this slide. And before discussing, as I already mentioned, before discussing what is the MVE, the Electronic Customs Declaration, in Spanish is Manifestación de Valor Electrónica. That's why the acronym is MVE. It is important to understand that this obligation is part of a much broader reform to the Mexican customs law. As you can see in your screen, on November 19, a key amendment to the Mexican customs law was published in the official Gazette of the Federation. This amendment introduced an extensive changes that were performed with the aim of strengthening customs control and oversight in Mexico. Particularly, the purpose of this reform was really clear: to modernize customs processes throughout the digital platform, technological tools, but also, apparently, to increase transparency and the most important, and I think that this is the most important part, is that this modification in the customs law was because the authority was looking for traceability in international shipments. You will hear two words all the time said by the authority: traceability and materiality. And we will talk about these two concepts later in this presentation. But it is important for you to know that those are the objectives and the purposes of this huge reform. Also, it is important to let you know that this customs law reform, it is important because Mexico or our authorities are not more focused only in the moment of the clearance, okay? Before the modification under the customs law, the most important moment was the clearance of the goods. Now, also, it is important to know this traceability of the goods. who is sending the goods? Do I have the invoice? Do I have all the documentation that demonstrates that the operation exists? So these are kind of questions that the authority will be performing when are performing the revision of the MVE. The authority is now moving toward a data-driven model where the documentation, commercial information, customs value, suppliers, payment, etc., need to be consistent, complete, and available before the import operation take place. So this is really important because before 2025, I realized the operation, and I can submit or complete information even um, after the importation, a lot of time after the importation. Now I need to demonstrate before the importation all the documentation that demonstrates that the operation exists. For example, with the contract, with an invoice, and with all the transport documentation that I have for the importation of any goods. So this is an important context that I think that you need to know in order to understand all the obligations behind the MVE obligation to transmit all the information through the platform. Okay. So in the next slide, I think that it's quite clear. It says why the amendment matters for US or foreign exporters. Uh, this is because at the end of the day, this matter affects them directly. Although this reform primarily governs, as we will see in the other slides, Mexican customs procedures, it has direct implications for export transaction because, first, Mexican authorities can demand more detailed documentation about the transaction value and logistics. We were used to submit only the invoice, only the documentation related to the transportation, and probably if you are Mexican importers, you know that most of the time we didn't submit any other document to demonstrate the value of the product, even though that documentation was required by law. So now, with this modification, the authority can demand more detailed documentation to know what is happening with that operation. Second, importers must ensure that the export documentation from US sellers is precise and comprehensive to avoid fines and delays. This is also important because at the end of the day, this modification will impact directly to the importers. But if they don't have the enough or the complete documentation to submit it into the platform, they will have an important risk, and this risk is called fines and delays during the importation. So that is other reason why the amendment matters for US exporters. And finally, stronger enforcement and extended verification powers may lead to increased customs audit details. I think that I have a question. Yeah, I have a question here. I think that there is echo in the presentation. I'm so sorry for that. Let me see. June, I don't know if you are there, if you can hear me well.
Aquí estoy.
¿Sí me escuchas bien?
Sí.
Okay. Anyway, Cash, probably I will try to adjust my headphones. If Okay, thanks, Manuel. If you cannot hear me well, just send me a message. I promise that I'm doing also the question and answer. So the most important is that you understand, and what I'm saying, and etc. So thank you for your comments. So regarding this slide, only to end. it is important, I insist, that even though the legal obligation of all these modifications is formally imposed on the Mexican importer or the importer of record in Mexico, the importer will depend on the exporter's documentation to comply with the obligation. That said, in practice, and sorry to insist, invoices, contracts, purchase orders, payment terms, even the Incoterms, the transport documentation, and any other commercial supports. And for that is, for example, emails, contracts, any other documentation that help me to support the value of the merchandise of the goods will be useful to provide to the Mexican authority all this file in order to demonstrate the cost of the goods. Okay, so the key message of this slide is the following. This reform is not about enforcement, or not only about enforcement. It reflects a structural shift toward data-driven customs control where transparency and documentary quality are central to compliance. Um, this reform is not only about enforcement, as I already mentioned, so this is why we will focus on what do I need to comply with, okay? So that's why Mexican clients or related parties are being really worried about the compliance of these obligations. Um, about this slide, it is about this requirement of expanded digital requirements, okay? The mandatory digital integration and control. For customs authorities now have a broader powers to require real-time electronic data, interoperability of systems, and digital tracking of goods across the supply chain. At the end of the day, the modification is this. They have all the information, or they will have all the information in real time. So they will have, or they will be able to manage all the information, to review all the documentation, and if needed, or if that is the case, they will be able to start a verification process or to start a revision on the company that is not complying with the obligation. That's why we need to know what we need to submit into the platform. So just a little pause here. Diana Moreno, hice una versión en español en marzo. Esta justo it's address, es en inglés, address en English. Si quieres, te mandamos la, el seguimiento o el vínculo de la presentación en español para que la tengas. Joy Crucia, and thanks for the information. I think that it will be good to have this interaction. Joy Crucia, as a US exporter, is there a set list of documents that we are required to provide to brokers? We seem to have many different requirements in dealing with different brokers. The fast answer to that question is yes. Probably I can, at the end of the presentation, can show you slide comparing the documentation we need to submit with the MVE and with other obligation, that is the electronic file. So yes, we can do that. Joe, also, if I don't have time, if you leave me your email, I can send you specifically the obligations that the broker can require you for the importation. Because at the end of the day, and taking advantage of this question, it is important for you to know, and that's why I started with all the modification on the customs law, because we are facing a lot of changes in the regulation. We have the obligation to submit the value statement declaration, and we have a checklist. I will show you specifically the checklist during this presentation, but also there is another obligation of the electronic file that the importers must have in their computers, in their daily operations. And there is a third file, I know it's too crazy, that the brokers need to comply for every operation. So for that reason, probably your brokers are asking you to send additional data and additional information. It is important for you to know that, like 2 weeks ago, there was a modification in the in the rules that require less documentation than in January. So it is important to review with your broker because probably they are requiring you more information than what is required according to law. So of course I can send you the information. If you also you can send me an email and we can share like compare what your broker is requiring you and if it's those information it's okay or not. Okay. Um, that's it. So let's back to the presentation. So I hope that that helps you, Joe. And if not, I can add additional information at the end of the presentation. Okay. These requirements are focused first on customs authority now have broader powers. I already mentioned that. They will have electronic documentation, which must be submitted through authorized digital channels before clearance. That is the electronic platform, namely BUSE, now BUTSE, no, that it's a new platform. And exporters should be prepared to share electronically structured invoice data. The correct Incoterm, it's really, really important to talk with our companies in Mexico, with our clients in Mexico, and have the same understanding about Incoterms, freight and insurance breakdowns, and proof of payment swiftly with importers. And coordinate with Mexican importers on digital file formats and attachments for customs clearance. Finally, about the context, it is important to highlight that the reform also brings a stricter liability and penalties framework. I think that this is the most important part at the end of the day because nobody wants to have penalties or to pay fines, right? So, one of the key messages of this amendment is that customs participants are now subject to agreed accountability. Fines and penalties for customs violation have been significantly increased, but really, really significantly increased. And this changes the level of exposure for all the parties involved in an operation. That's why, for example, Joe, at the end of the day, brokers are requiring more information because the penalties are so high that they are thinking, it's better if I ask for more information, I avoid any penalty, and this is like the justification behind all these requirements they are asking for. But at the end of the day, also it is important for importers or exporters to know that they can only ask for what it is imposed by law, no more, no less information. This is especially relevant for customs broker, and the agents, because they before customs law modification, they used to have some exemption of responsibility. Now they do not have those exemption of responsibility, so they need to confirm the information, DHS code to avoid any penalties or even the cancellation of the license that they use to provide the service. So for US exporter also, the practical implication, I think it's quite clear. At the end of the day, the documentation quality matters, and we need to know specifically what the law is requiring me. Now, I think that with this, we have all the framework or the background to understand the obligation under the electronic value declaration obligation. Okay. What is the MVE and why are we here today? The MVE at the end of the day, I move the presentation. The MVE is a mandatory declaration required by Mexican Customs Authority to the Mexican importers to, and this is the most important, to provide customs value of the goods imported to Mexico, to determine the taxable base of the imported goods to pay VAT. Of course, they are asking and they are requirement for the payment of taxes to pay VAT and the general import tax through the information provided, and to provide the elements comprising the transaction of import goods. The MVE, the Manifestación de Valor, is a strictly operative custom-related document. It must be exactly the same as the Declaration of Value. And this is the most important thing. What I'm reporting in the operation to the customs broker and what it is in the customs documentation, in the pedimento, must be the same that is in my MVE, in my declaration. If there is any difference between what I'm reporting in the customs clearance documentation, in the pedimento, and that information is different from what I'm submitting to the platform, I will have a fine. Um, I have had the chance to review some documentation of companies that are under revision of SAT, and the information they are submitting to have the customs clearance documentation is quite different from what they are sending to the authority in regard to the electronic value statement. So this is the most important. The information must match. Any discrepancy may be ground for auditing to the importer and of fines. This reform aims to ensure traceability and verifiable value of imported goods. The customs broker becomes a guarantor of compliance with obligations and payment of foreign trade duties, and as I already mentioned, new fines are created, another increase in value or percentage. In the other screen, I won't stop a lot of minutes here. It is only for you to have this, like all the legal background behind this obligation. And what it is important here is for you to let you know that MVE supports the transaction value, the relationship between the buyer and the seller. It is important also to provide detailed information on the amounts of expenses related to the operation and to provide supporting documentation for payments and expenses of services. This modification, of course, was prepared by the Mexican importer, but based on information provided by the exporter. This is also only for information to understand the legal background of this obligation. At the end of the day, this obligation is not new. No. What is new is the level of visibility, traceability, and control that the Mexican authority is thinking to have through the electronic value declaration. At the end of the day, as you can see in the slide, this is an obligation that it is contained in GIGAT, WTO obligation, in the USMCA. In the USMCA, there are customs valuation disciplines. And also in the US, for example, importers are required to declare the customs value through a CBP form. So this is not new. What is new, it's only the transition from substantive obligation that already existed, but nobody complied, and through a digital, traceable, and enforceable compliance mechanism. Before 2025, nobody complied with the obligation, nobody submit the documentation, but now with artificial intelligence, the authority will follow the submission of this information and verify if that is okay, if that supports the operation, etc. Okay, so Finally, we're starting now to enter into the conversation. In general terms, here you have all the legal framework that are the general foreign trade rules, the customs law, and the customs regulation. The specific requirements or the checklist that we need to provide is contained in Article 81 of the Customs Law Regulation. So, why my client, why my related party is asking me, is requiring me more information just now? This is because, as you can see, well, in this slide, that June 1st is the date to enter into force of this obligation. This is a mistake, but well. On December 9th, the mandatory transition to digital declaration was established. But as you probably know, companies were not prepared, even SAT was not prepared to receive all this documentation, and it was a crazy time in December 2025. The obligation was postponed to April the 1st, but once again, we were not prepared to comply with the obligation. The platform, I think, was not ready to receive all the information. And once again, the obligation, the entry into force of this obligation was postponed to June the 1st. So, just a few days away, we enter a phase where full compliance is unavoidable. I think that this time the obligation will enter into force. So that's why it is quite important to know what we need to submit into the platform. Now, what is the purpose behind this regulation? As you can see in your screen also, I prepare a list of what I think are the main purposes, the main objectives of this modification. First, of course, to have greater transparency in customs valuation. If the authority has all the information, of course, they can review that information and confront what I'm saying in the declaration with what I'm saying in the customs clearance documentation. So that's why it's a matter of transparency. Second, it's the prevention of undervaluation of goods. Now, the government is highlighting the importance of reporting the commercial value of goods and is pushing a lot to avoid or to oblige to make the companies comply with the obligation under the valuation of goods. Third, the traceability and materiality of operation. These two words that we will talk in other slides, but they are really important. This means to know where the goods comes from, and second, to have all the documentation that supports that traceability. I cannot say something if I don't have the documentation that supports that affirmation. This is really, really important. If I am saying that I am Aquila, I need to submit a maquila contract, a maquila agreement. If I'm saying that I'm not paying, for example, insurance or transportation, I need to demonstrate that with the invoice, with, for example, my maquila agreement, etc. If for any reason there is no clear information about why, about what the I'm my affirmation, I need to submit an affidavit to let the authority know why I am saying that. Okay, so it is important just to finalize with this idea. Whatever I'm saying to the authority, I need to submit a documentation to confirm, to let them know that I have materiality and traceability of all the information. Four, the real-time monitoring by the authorities. If I'm submitting the information to the platform, they are reviewing all the information because, of course, they have already EA doing this work. So that's why it's really important to submit the real information that supports the operation. And finally, the comprehensive strengthening of customs control in Mexico. They are controlling more our operation. That's everything they have on the table. Why does this matter to US exporters or to foreign exporters again? Because the MVE shifts compliance earlier in the supply chain. I will have or I have to comply with this obligation before customs clearance, no after. If the foreign exporter does not provide complete and consistent documents in advance, then probably the Mexican importer will not submit all the information. There are certain or specific items that where I can submit information earlier, but it depends on the specific type of operations. But the general idea is that I will need to submit all the information before customs clearance. And here I want to pause to emphasize a phrase that appears in our materials and that should become a guiding principle for all people that is interested in doing importation into Mexico. And is that if the information is not ready before importing, we have a risk in front of us. So this is what changed with this modification. So here in your screen, sorry, because the information is in Spanish, you have like just the justification of the authority to perform all this modification. No, at the end of the day, as you can see in your screen, the authority is pushing the verification, is starting verification on companies that import products at prices below market value and in violation of non-tariff regulation or restrictions. That is really important. That's why the MVE exists. That's why the platform was implemented, because the authority is doing revisions on importers that probably are importing products below the market value. Why? Because they are paying less taxes. That's everything. So these images illustrate the main conduct or activities commonly carried out by taxpayers and like the activities that the authority is pushing. So it is important. I insist, I'm so sorry because this is in Spanish, but it was an official document. Okay. So this is, I have already mentioned that the authority is using artificial intelligence to do the revision of all the documentation that we submit for verification, etc. And this image of the official SAT announcement regarding collection cost reductions under the government's master policy plan. So it is saying that they are spending 25 cents per every 100 pesos they are entering into the system, you know. So it is a huge business for this app. So there is a reduction of collection of cost under government's master policy, and they are telling us that they are investing in technology and digital processes to make enforcement more efficient. That's everything. So MVE will allow SAT to verify this information, and if we don't comply with that, we will have strong fines. So the purpose at the end of the day, is to declare the actual customs value of the goods. There was a practice, for example, if I'm importing samples, there were companies that reported the samples cost as $1. So it is important to know that there are specific rules for samples. And if those rules are not complied, I need to report the value of such samples with the real cost, with the market value of such goods. If not, I can have a fine from the authority. So the purpose, at the end of the day, I insist, is to report the real value of the goods, additional expenses, valuation method, and contractual data. Determine the taxable base of foreign trade taxes. These two words, that was materiality and traceability. At the end of the day, the authority is supporting or is asking us to support or operation with documentation that demonstrates how the customs value was determined. And this is the cost of the transportation, the cost of the insurance, the cost of the material, every item I'm declaring into the customs to the customs broker, I need to demonstrate the payment. I need to submit the payment, the invoice, and of course, the amount. So, the purpose, of course, is to ensure that the declared value of imported good is accurate, verifiable, and congruent. The authority is trying to avoid undervaluation, fraud, and tax evasion. Um, the next slide is about the obligations for import and export. I think that we have already mentioned all of that. I think that we can pass through this slide. The specific obligations about the MVE for Mexico is, at the end of the day, first, to submit each transaction via BUSEM, along with the corresponding information and documentation. Indicate the tax ID numbers of individuals, of any person that the company decides to authorize. It could be, for example, the customs agent. Declare the e-document in the customs declaration. When I'm submitting the MVE, I will have a e-document number. So this document number is really important because this document must be in the customs declaration documentation, in my pedimento. So that's why the submission of all the information must be before the customs clearance. Retain the MVE for 5 years, according to Article 13 of the Federal Tax Code. But remember that this is also an obligation under the USMCA to keep all the information that is related with the operation. So that's like a general obligation that we all know. Custom declaration correction. This is quite important. If for any reason I need to change the value in my customs clearance documentation, I cannot modify my declaration, my first declaration. I cannot modify it. I need to submit another documentation, another declaration, and then to change the customs declaration. So that's quite important, and this is a matter of customs. What will not apply when the automated selection mechanism determines that a customs audit is required? This will be only proceed until the audit has been concluded. So I cannot modify it if I'm under the selection mechanism. During the exercise of verification powers, except in cases where the taxpayer proceeds to correct their tax or custom status. Remember that if I am under verification process, I can correct my status before there is an official determination of the authority. So that's important. The next slide, and now we have arrived to the the specific obligation to submit the information. What documents do I require to submit in order to comply with the MVE? Okay, so this let me, because we have some questions here. Do, 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 do. Okay, Mario, I can answer your question. I think that we will have the chance in the last slide. So I have your question here. So, okay, in this slide, we have all the information we need to submit into the portal. I have known that there are certain programs that allow us to facilitate the submission of the information into the portal. But it is important to know that we need to know what documentation correspond us to submit. At the end of the day, the platform will be fitted by us. And if we declare that it is not needed any document, the platform at the end of the day will not require us that documentation. I mean, we need to understand the specific rule and to submit the information that is needed according to law, not according to the platform or according to what Jasmine is saying. I need to compare that with what the law is requiring me to submit. So the list is the next one. First is, and I think that is one of the most important requirements, I need to submit the commercial invoice or equivalent document. I think that you already know, because at the end of the day, we used to send this documentation to all related companies or to our clients in Mexico. This is the foundational document of every transaction. No, every commercial transaction has an invoice. So I think that it is easy to understand why we need this document into our file, MVE file. The second, bill of lading, packing list, airway bill, or other transport document. Please, it is really important to understand that this requirement is about transport documents. Only that. The contract, the payment, the invoice of transportation is included in other specific requirements. About this, I only need to submit bill of lading, packing list, airway bill. Jasmine, I already sent this information to my customs broker. Do I need to submit it again for MVE purposes? The answer is yes. Remember that there are different files, are different obligations. So I will need to send it to my customs broker, but also to submit that information into the MVE, well, not MVE platform, but into the section for MVE, okay? That is really, really important. Even though, remember that we have like 3 or 4 files we need to comply with according to the new regulation. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, when I need to submit this information. Third, I need to verify if I will ask for an origin preference, I need to submit this certificate of origin. If I think that it is easy to understand, no? That's it. Well, this is important in the context of USMCA. For example, if I'm declaring that a product is, or the origin of a product is USA, well, I need to submit that into the MVE because at the end of the day, it will impact in the cost of the product because of tariffs. Okay, so it is quite important. Fourth, the guarantee referred to in subsection E, section 1 of Article 36A. Fifth, the document evidencing payment for the goods, such as an electronic funds transfer or letter of credit. Wherever the payment was made, if I realize an electronic transference, if I paid it with cash, whatever the means I use to pay the product, I need to submit the demonstration to the authority that it was performed, it was realized. Of course, electronic funds transfer is preferable, but at the end of the day, whatever means, it's good. Only we need to submit that information. For US exporter, this means that the commercial invoice is not merely a billing document. It becomes a custom valuation document in Mexico, and that I need to match the invoice, the price that is in the invoice, with the electronic transfer. So that's, I think that with that, we understand that this requirement. Also, I will need to submit every documentation that is related to transportation, insurance, and related expenses associated with the transaction in question. So, the first requirement, remember, was the bill of lading, packing list, airway bill, or other transport documentation. Only those documentation related to the transportation. Also, if I, as importer, pay such transportation, I will need to include into my submission all those documentation related to such expenses. Remember, transportation, insurance, and related expenses. I always say that there is a rule of 3 documents. I need to submit the contract, no. I need to submit the payment, no. The transfer, the acknowledgement of receipt of cash, the credit, if I have credit, the documentation that demonstrates that I have a credit with the company. So it's, once again, the contract, the invoice, and the payment. For every expense I perform, I need to include 3 documents into my submission. Contracts and, where applicable, purchase orders related to the transaction involving the goods that are the subject of the transaction. This is quite important too, and we need to understand this obligation. I have seen that there is certain misunderstanding about how I can comply with this obligation. We all know that for international transactions, it is not needed to have a contract signed by the parties. Because at the end of the day, I have Incoterms, I have verbal transaction, I have the confirmation on an email. However, our Mexican authority does not understand the commercial transactions in that manner. So they are specifically requiring to have a contract of every transaction I have. This is really, really important. And the authority will review, I'm really, really sure, will review that if I have the contract that demonstrates that there is a transaction before my operation. Jasmine, I only perform one operation with that supplier. The answer is, I'm really, really sorry. We need a contract. At least a simple format of contract that demonstrates to the authority the price, the cost of the product, and the price, the cost, the product that is that is subject of the transaction, etc. It is important also to emphasize that for complying with these requirements, we need to verify that we do not, in Mexico we say, no nos demos un balazo en el pie, no? Do not sign a contract that probably in the long term will make me to have a problem, a situation, because I decide to not include, for example, a clause regarding conflicts in the operation, or related to Incoterms, or related to protection of confidential data, etc. So don't sign a contract if the contract is not ensuring your operation, is not protecting your operation. At the end of the day, do not sign a contract that is not you are not agree with. Not only because we have to comply with this obligation. So that's it. And as you can read from this obligation, it says contracts and, where applicable, purchase order. Purchase order are not substituting contracts. We need to submit contracts. And if I have the purchase order, I can submit those purchase orders, but no one or the other. That is really important also to be clear and to have it in mind. Next one, those supporting the additional items referred in Article 25. Those are all the expenses related with, for example, insurance, transportations, etc. So, what we said in Spanish, incrementales, okay? Any other information and documentation necessary for determining the customs value or commercial value of the goods in question. This is like a very, very, very sad modification because here the authority can require everything. So if I have my contract, but I have also the negotiation, please keep the negotiation of that operation. For example, if I have an operation that the supplier gave me a specific discount because I have been working with that supplier for 50 years, keep that email safe. Because at the end of the day, the only way the authority will believe in us is with this traceability and materiality. So if we demonstrate that the discount is not because I'm declaring a, a, a value that is not real, but I'm declaring a value that it's because I have a real discount, because I have a long-term relationship, and I have the manner to demonstrate. All that information will be in this in this section. Any other information and documentation necessary for determining the customs value or commercial value of the goods in question. So also, credit notes or documents containing special discounts in cash or kind to be applied at the time of payment. Remember, I need to submit the demonstration of the payment that I paid the product. If that is not the case, because I have a credit, the recommendation is to submit an affidavit saying that to the authority. I cannot submit the payment because I have a credit. I have a 60 days credit with my supplier affidavit. And what is for real is that you will need to submit the proof of payment in the 60 days. Because if not, remember, there is an EA, artificial intelligence, reviewing all operations. So please don't do that. Don't say the authority, I will submit a proof of payment in 60 days. If you will have this proof of payment in 200 days, declare that in your statement. Don't lie to the authority. So, recommended checks. I think that this information is about checklists, but also about avoid any risk. So, what do you need to do? What is the action plan? I think that is really important to map the value process, to know the amount of the product, to know if I'm paying insurance, if I'm paying transportation, what Incoterm I'm using. I need to verify any data that I'm declaring into the customs broker. So Um, Remember that this goes beyond minimum compliance. These are the best practices that can shield your operation from any risk, from any contingency. So, first, map the value process. What I'm paying for that specific issue or not. Identify information sources. If I'm paying insurance, who has the payment? Who is declaring that? Because believe it or not, sometimes we do not know if we are paying, who is paying, or even though if I have the supporting documentation. So it is really important to have communication with all the departments in our company. Review the contracts. Probably I have a contract, but I signed the contract in 1994. So probably the contract will not comply or will not be enough to comply with this obligation because probably I'm not paying insurance because I am a maquila. But that specific information has not been declared in the contract because it was signed in 1994 and the requirements were different. So talk with my directors and let's modify the contract. I know that it's not easy, but if we don't start doing that, we will not have all the information on time if the authority relies a verification in the company. Validate the incrementables, or the additional cost on the operation. If I'm reporting an Incoterm SIF, an Incoterm X works, validate that effectively I'm paying or not such activities, the transportation, the insurance, etc. Okay? Ensure timing. Ensure that your supplier will have the information you need to submit the declaration and train teams. You can have all the information. You can know what you need to submit. But if you don't train your teams, you will have a huge risk. And remember, the fines are really high. So this is the map transaction. I need to know who is the supplier, the transaction related contract, if there is a relationship, a payment, a transportation, and insurance. You need to map all your operation. Know who is in front of every obligation, who needs to submit the documentation. If it's the client if it is the supplier, to identify when I can ask or require that information. It is your accountability department to know when they can give me the information of the payment. Every specific requirement, remember, must be complied on time to avoid any risk before the authority. So we recommend to do a self-assessment. Do you identify all the expenses that you perform before customs clearance? Yes or no? Can you test them? Is your information before customs clearance? Are your areas aligned to comply with this obligation? And here you have, I can send you also I have a Word document with all the checklists. This is the documentation you need to comply with in order to submit the information. The same information I provided you while I was reading the slide is in this checklist. You need to review, for example, consistency in the invoice, MVE, and customs declaration. You need to see if there is match of declared Incoterm. This is really important. Believe it or not, a lot of companies have a lot of problems with the Incoterm. Declare value and payments made match. Review of relationship between the parties. It is really, really important. The calculations, the supporting accounting and financial evidence, supplementary customs documentation. And this is the checklist. I lied. This is the checklist. So I'm not gonna repeat all the information, but what I already mentioned is here in this checklist. The the invoice, the contract, the bill of lading, the certificate of origin, the guarantee, the purchase order, the proof of payment, every documentation that probably I will need to submit to demonstrate the value of the product is here. If I don't have, okay, I can pass to the other requirement. So you will have this information, and I think that we don't have enough time, but I will try to finish because I have some questions here. This is important. I will try to answer. I don't know what to do, June. Let me finish. I will go through the slide I think that are important, and I will try to finish with your questions. So we can send you the presentation. Here you have the exception and special cases. It's important for you to know that mainly is for exportation, for return of definitive export, for temporary return of temporary exports in the same condition. Also, they are applicable, for example, for AEO modality, for companies with a bonded warehouse authorization for the automotive industry. There are certain exceptions for the compliance of this obligation. We can talk about if it is necessary to, because at the end of the day, they need those companies would need to elaborate the declaration. The only exemption is to submit it into the platform. So common questions that probably are not yet solved by the authority is that purchase order can be used instead of a contract. I insist the answer is no. It could be an exception if the purchase order is signed and it is a robust purchase order with all the information of a contract. But at the end of the day, it's a contract. So please submit the contract, not a purchase order. Does a purchase order with contractual elements equate to a contract? It could be, but it needs to be signed, executed by the parties. Is the MVE mandatory in virtual shipments, in global complementary shipments? Do value adjustment for low? These are questions that have already been solved. I'm not gonna stop here because I don't have enough time, but I can send you the Q&A answer from the authority that mostly resolve some of those issues. What if I have a question that is really important? Review the transaction. That is really important. Understand your transaction. Research and review the applicable legal framework. Ask your lawyer to send you the legal framework. You don't believe on anyone. First, review the legal framework. Review the documents issued by the authorities, for example, this Q&A document. And if I don't solve my question, then you can consult sources such as associations and law firms. And also, this is important, we can consult directly to the authority. We have a lot of questions resolved now and we can answer some issues. But if you can do the first, that consult directly to the authority, go to the legal framework and confirm that with your lawyer, it's gonna be okay. This is was only to show you how the platform was, but I think that we don't have enough time. So in the material that is in Spanish, I explain specifically how to submit all the information. So this is for your information to know that the fines are too high. So if you can see, for example, when elements cannot be determined, for example, taxes on foreign trade, there are lack of elements, the amount of the fine is 100,000 pesos. So it's too high. So that's it. And I think the challenges, it's correctly define the statement valuation method and determine whether there is a related party relationship, the integration of the information from various commercial documents, correct identification of ads, Incoterms, freight insurance, etc., consistency between information declared in different systems, and document management. Talk with your team. If you have any additional question, please do not hesitate to contact me. There is a lot of information that I can share with you. We don't have enough time. I hope I can clarify at least why this obligation is quite important to Mexican importers. So I will try to answer the questions. Um, Anonymous attendee, but customs broker already has all these documents. So what the exporter need to do additionally sounds like the broker should file MVE using same documents. That is the 1 million question. The answer is yes. The customs broker has almost all the information, almost the same information, but that is like the huge question. The authority wants the importer to submit the information. That is the obligation of an importer of the importer party. So I understand you. The customs broker already have the information, but that is the obligation of the customs broker, and in that way the authority also can go directly to the importer and do verifications and have all the information in the portal. So I understand you. I don't know what to say. It's like it is what is happening with this administration. There are certain things that duplicate work because at the end of the day, almost the same documentation we submit for MVE. The camera is here. For MVE, we need to submit almost the same information for the electronic file, and the same information is submitted for customs broker, and the customs broker are required to have also a specific file for every operation and every client they have. So it's crazy. The authorities trying to cross information everywhere. So if there is any discrepancy with the information the broker have, with the information the import party is submitting, I think that with that cross information they will do the verifications. So I think that is because of that. So even though they have the information, please submit all the specific requirements according to Article 81 that we just read. What if payment terms are 60 days and not yet paid at time of import? It doesn't matter. However, I will need to submit an explanation to the authority. If the payment is not being submitted because I have not realized it because I have a credit, I need to submit the invoice. I need and the invoice. This is like the best practice. Need to have the explanation or the terms and condition of the payment. So you need to submit the invoice with the terms and condition. If the terms and conditions are not in the invoice, include a document with terms and conditions. If I don't have the terms and conditions, explain the authority that situation into an affidavit. In the affidavit, you will need to say to the authority that you have a credit with the company, that credit probably it is demonstrated with the contract. That's why we need to review our contracts, and or that because there is a specific situation to the company, whatever, I will pay in 60 days. Just we need to explain that to the authority with an affidavit, with the contract, with terms and conditions. Remember, we need to submit 3 documents: the invoice, the contracts, and if I don't have the payment, an affidavit. If I have the payment and not the affidavit. Will the slides be available after the webinar? Yes. As far as I know, our team, that it's a super team, will send you the video And please don't hear my voice again. The video and the slide, so don't worry. Mhm. I would like to know if the e-documents are repeated. That is, if the customs broker is already declaring them in a motion, we must digitize them again. Yes, you need to submit twice. Remember, there are different obligations. One is for the customs broker and importer, according to Article 36 of the customs law, and the other one it's because of the customs declaration value. So there are different obligations. Oh, this is too large. Hi, Jasmine. What can the importer of record declare as incrementables for the transportation piece in MVE? At the time of customs clearance, there is no carrier invoice yet. As the delivery has not been completed yet, the importer customer has credit terms with the transportation carrier company. Will the carrier pro forma work for MVE purpose? The close, the short answer is yes. But we need to review specifically the operation because there are a lot of things here. First, the delivery has not been completed yet, so that is understandable. We need to probably, I would suggest you to prepare an affidavit and explain to the authority the conditions of your operation. And in that affidavit, please explain the authority that you will not have the invoice until the delivery is completed and that you have certain credit terms. So explain that into an affidavit, and if possible, confirm that or submit also terms and conditions or a contract. This is the perfect moment to complete contracts with the information we need to submit into the MBE. No, if you, for example, this anonymous attendee, if you don't have contract with this client in Mexico, you can prepare a specific clause in the contract saying that you will, that the supplier, foreign supplier, will give you a credit for X term, you know? So in that way, you can demonstrate that you have a credit. With the contract with your transportation, with the transport company, please review that there is a clause that specifies that they will give you the invoice when the delivery is completed. But pro forma, you can submit the pro forma, and when you have the final document, you can submit this final document. This is also important. Once you have the final document, you can submit that into the platform. So that's it. There are all the questions that I have here. I have one that I didn't. Si mi factura tiene un cargo extra por tarimas, ¿cómo se puede declarar? Hay que ver de dónde es el cargo extra, Mario, de la factura, si es antes de la importación o después de la importación. Pero si quieres, mándame un correíto de cómo viene el cargo y te ayudo a revisarlo. ¿Sale? So I don't know if you don't have any additional question. I think that it's everything from my side. Thank you for staying in this seminar, for joining us, and that's it. That's it. If you have any question, if you need anything else from my side, please contact me. I'm here to support your operation. Bien, bueno, la versión en español. ¿Me mandas un correíto y te la mando? Oh, les pongo mi correo y te mando la versión en español. Ahí explico cómo subir información, y demás. Entonces, ahí está mi correo. Ya lo había puesto, pero pues aquí está. No sé cómo. Ya vi cómo contestarte directo. Ok, thank you so much. Muchas gracias a todos y quedamos a sus órdenes. Bye bye.